Welcome everybody to Tekla Podcast, and this is quite new podcast, and the first episode will be with Morten Kaasik from Consolis Group, CES Estonia. But before we start, I would like to say that this episode will be in video format in YouTube and also in audio format in podcast platforms. So go ahead and see in your favorable file format how you like to consume. Don't forget to, of course, subscribe and follow our channel to see more this kind of podcasts when they come up. First of all, Consolis Group is one. They are dealing with mainly precast construction structures from design to manufacture, and they have more than 11,000 employees. At first, when I was looking the map, then I was thinking that they are the customers that are all over the world, but actually these are the entities that they have all over the world, mostly in Europe, but also I found in Brazil and Asia, so quite big group. But today's guest is from CES Estonia, that is one part of Consolis Group, and they are located in Tallinn in Estonia, and they are doing design mostly in Nordic countries like Finland, Sweden, Norway, and also Denmark, and for the Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. Morten can correct me if there is some mistaken or something wrong, but I believe so. Morten Kaasik has been worked in this CES Estonia more than 5 years already, and like many structural engineers, he has started as a structural engineer and raised up to, and now his position is design modeling tools project manager. So he will probably say a little bit more what he's doing, but it's basically improving the quality, and as they are working with Tekla Structures, then I think there will be a lot of valuable information. Side notes on personal notes come out. I know that Morten is a very big athlete, and he has done many bicycle marathons, 89 kilometers, not the easy one, and not the only one. I have done one running marathon, and I would say not anymore, but I don't know what's wrong with him, and he's doing more and more these bicycle marathons, and he has done also running half marathon, so going in different areas. So Morten, welcome to our podcast, and tell me a little bit, was it correct, or would you like to add something that I missed out?
Yeah, I think you are 95% correct. So just a few words also to describe the background and my work relationships with both CES Estonia and Consolis. So it is true that I have been in the group for over 5 years, I think 5.5 already. From this time, first 3 years, I think, or 3.5 years, I was working directly for CES Estonia, and I was working actually for the Swedish business unit design teams. So I was involved in design projects for Strangbeton Consolis, which is also part of the Consolis group. And actually, that time was really interesting because when I started working in CES Estonia, we had, if I'm not mistaken, we had probably three or four Tekla Structures licenses. And when I came to work in CES Estonia, I had previously a little experience with Tekla, but then for the first, I think, half year, I worked only in AutoCAD. But then at one point we took one of the first, if not the first real big Tekla projects for the Strangbeton design team. And the design team was, I think, 8 people, and I was the only one who had ever seen Tekla Structures before. So this project was a real learning curve for me, but the entire team, because I also had to mentor and train the others there to use Tekla. But yeah, that was the background from design. But then at one point, I switched my hats a bit and started working more for the Consolis group. So actually today I'm sitting in Tallinn office, but most of my work is for the entire Consolis group and working with the design tools for the group itself. So like Sten said, the position is as a design modeling tools project manager. And actually also a second part of my job nowadays is as a BI development manager, which is working with the Tekla and also how to use the data we get from Tekla and how to make better decisions on it. But yeah, most of my work is really, like Sten said, to work with the design tools, both internal developments and also working together with Trimble to make some common development projects to make life easier for the designers.
Cool. I'm glad to hear that you were from very start, from very quite beginning. And can you give some overview, or how was at the beginning when you started? There were at the beginning 3 or 4 licenses, Tekla licenses, and the first biggest projects. So how was the starting with Tekla in your company, in your case, and also, if you would start today a new company, then what would you do differently, learning from this your experience?
Yeah, good question. So from our side, I guess our starting point was a bit simpler than for most, because from the Swedish side, they had already built their own business environment also in Tekla. So they had all of the profiles, settings, drawing templates, and so on. Everything was there. Of course, the only big obstacle was that everything is in Swedish. But the technical vocabulary we had established to learn in Swedish before, since we had been working with the Swedish templates in AutoCAD as well. So that wasn't such a big obstacle. But so the starting point was, as said, so that I was the only one who had used Tekla before. And I had been also involved in some projects in Consolis as well in Tekla. So I had some understanding on how should you even reinforce elements and how should you create drawings. But it was mostly still learning on the go. With I think still on occasion we look back at this project with the same people who were also working on it. I think most are still in CES Estonia working. And we have told many times that if we would do it again, we would probably not do anything differently, because we didn't have the knowledge to do things different. So of course, in hindsight, it's really easy to say that, we would have maybe looked more how to automate the creation of drawings and how to use more components and so on. But it was, mostly learning on the go. But even in this first project, I started creating custom components. I had no experience with that, but it was really looking very critically at what you're doing. So if I saw that I have 500 wall elements and I need to add a very specific detail to all of them, then I started thinking that, hey, maybe there is an easier way. Like in AutoCAD, you have blocks, and then I Googled a bit so that you can create custom components. I must admit, my first custom component was quite ugly and very robust, but it did the job. But if I would give some advice to someone who starts working with Tekla in their company and starts implementing, I think it's really easy to, or really important not to start running immediately, but first plan a bit that what templates you're using, what Tekla environment you're using, and if you have some very specific solutions you're creating, then definitely look into the Tekla warehouse, that maybe there are some tools already available that can help you. Or if not, then definitely I would advise to look into the Tekla forums, where there's a lot of advice in how to create components or how to make your work better. So really look very critically in the way that don't use Tekla as you used AutoCAD. Make sure you unleash the potential there.
Okay, there is one thing is the templates and all this kind of like your company environment came from Sweden. And on the other hand, one side is the development or the environment, and the other side is the knowledge. So in your case, the knowledge, I think at that time we didn't have many Tekla like courses in Estonia, and so your option or only option was to go internet surfing and see from different forums and start learning by going through these free sources. Yes,
exactly.
Who don't know, listeners, then in TS Guide blog articles, I have given out that article, I think 11 or 12 places. Most of them are free with links where can you learn Tekla for free. There are different kind of Trimble only how to say, the environment where you can learn. Then there is YouTube channel, some profiles brought out to follow, and there are many links if you want to start learning and then not ready to go buy a course. How is today? So what do you think today? What is the most important when you want to work with Tekla and do this kind of like engineering job? Is it about this development? Is it about training? Is it about hiring the most expensive like skilled workers or designers, or is it make sense to train inside, or how to some procedures or technology, automation? What do you think? What is the key of success, let's say so?
Yeah, great question again. So how I look at it is that Tekla is a huge toolbox, and not just Tekla, but you have a lot of extensions in Tekla warehouse, and even in the standard Tekla, when you open it, there's usually for doing one specific action there are 10 different ways to do it. So I would say that one of the most important things is really to see what you need for your company. What are the challenges you need to solve with the software, and make sure you find from this huge toolbox the main tools you should be using. And definitely, if you have more people in your company, if you have a bigger company, then make sure you create some procedures or steps that the designers really need to do there. I think a good comparison, once again, is the old saying that if you only have a hammer, then everything is a nail to you. So make sure you fill your toolbox with more tools you can use in the solution.
You mean as your position is the design tool develop or the team manager, and also you mentioned a lot of choosing the correct tools, and when you started your first project, then you learned quite quickly how to do these custom components. So question to you is how you decide today. There are two options when we have to do something. Then one hand we can put the time for the development, and the time equals money, and on the other side we can put this time just do it. So how you decide when it's reasonable, or the return of investment of development is makes sense of creating these kind of tools, and how complicated, because with the custom components already you can do very specific complicated, and you can do simple ones as your first ones were, but they were doing the job. So how you approach this question?
Yeah, very, very good question. And there are many different answers to that. The first thing, if you really start with Tekla, the first thing to look at is that these really small, quick wins that you can achieve. Actually, for these cases, creating the custom components is really easy, because, of course, with custom components, if you create something very complex, then it will take more time for you. But some really simple first detailing components, maybe it only takes 1 hour or 2 hours to create them. So how we approached it at first, when we didn't even have the skills to create very complex tools for ourselves, then the first thing we try to estimate is that, okay, if doing these drawing automation settings will take me, 24 hours to develop, but if my project hours are 1,000 hours, and if doing this 24 hours of development, I will save 100 hours in design work, then it's a no-brainer. I need to do it. But if it is not so clear, if it is a benefit in the short term, then you just need to evaluate that does it add benefit in more than one project. So if it is a tool or a setting that I can use in all of my design projects, then it may not give you back all the time savings in one project, but looking over the timeline of 1 year or 2 years, then you will see the benefits.
Makes totally sense. How you are solving the question and problem that how many engineers do you have in CES Estonia working with Tekla, more or less?
I think it should be around 45, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so there's quite many people working, and if somebody's doing a great tool or settings, then how you ensure that everybody are using or have access and they know that there are this kind of new tool and how to use it? Do you have procedures or something to recommend, or how you solve this question?
Yeah, there are a few different options for us. So as said, we are working for the business units in Nordic countries. So, and if we take as an example Sweden, which is one of our biggest colleagues in the group, in Strandbetong in Sweden, they have more than 100 designers. And actually, if we look at the CES organization, which is not only in Estonia, but it is in Estonia, Poland, and Romania. So altogether, we have in Consolis designers working for Strandbetong, almost 200, which means that if we create some very smart tools here in Estonia, we don't only want to keep them to ourselves, because we are all one group, one Consolis and one CES, which means that actually nowadays we are more and more really looking into that. We need to use the same tools and work in the same way to make sure that we don't reinvent the wheel in every project or every company. So to share these tools and maybe some settings, we use the Tekla capabilities of the firm settings, of course, which are set up by our colleague company Strandbetong in Sweden. So they are sharing their own settings and files there. But we are also using the option in Tekla to have the project access project settings, where you can also share your customized content. And that is the location where we share our content in the CES office in Tallinn, and also with the Polish and the Romanian colleagues. And just to share as information to make sure that people also use the tools, because that is one very critical thing, which is actually the biggest thing to solve. That okay, you can create lots of tools and settings and rules, but how to make sure that people really use them. So of course we try to share information as much as possible in our company newsletters and communication channels. But one very good challenge we have started to solve now during this year is how could we automatically check and verify if the people are using these tools. That's another topic.
Sounds new interesting challenge, but I think this kind of we are doing also Estonian Tekla Estonian localization environment, and we have gone to this way that we are giving out the release notes, try to keep them really simple, short, easy to consume, and give it out. I assume that your developments are in English, as there are different countries and different people connected, or how you manage with the language issue, because some things are coming from Finland, from Finnish environment, and I have a struggle sometimes.
Yeah, for us, I think it's a transition period, because Consolis is historically a company that has bought different companies from different countries, which means that each business unit, like from Finland and Strandbetong, they have a lot of older tools as well, which are usually in their native language, so in Swedish and Finnish and so on. But now all new developments are done in English, and it's mainly for the reason to have the option that the CES office in Tallinn or Poland or Romania, that we can do design work for each of the Nordic countries. And for that reason, all the tools and user interfaces, everything is in English. But of course, the output, the drawings and such, they are still in the local language.
Morten, what do you think, how we would say that, I know that you are doing for Nordic countries and different countries, and in CES Estonia you have also these kind of like dedicated different business units. So what would you say, what's the main difference of these business units and working for different markets?
Yeah. So if we ask the question from our business units and from our designers, then everybody thinks that we are really unique and really special, and our wall elements are really unique and completely different from the other companies. But there's a very good example for that. That if you go to the factory and ask the wall element itself, hey wall, do you know which country you are in right now? So actually, the element doesn't care where they are. But so actually, I think the differences are a lot smaller than we think. So if you look at of course, there are differences in what are the solutions in the connections and lifting items that are used and so on. But the basics are still the same, that you need to have some tool for adding lifting items to elements, and you need to have a tool to add connection elements or connection items to elements and so on. But of course, there are definitely market differences still. So if we look at the work done in our Strangbeton business unit or Parma business unit, then their work scope is a bit different. So in Parma, they produce really standard solutions, mainly apartment buildings. Usually the span of hollow cores is very similar, and the wall elements are really simple. But Strangbeton as a business unit, they do more tailored solutions as well.
And you mentioned that the different countries have different, for example, embeds and connections. So how do you use this? Do you use different firm folders, different project folders, or do you use different model templates? Or how you have this kind of like packages, how you start, or you have the same base? It don't depend for what country or what segment, what company are doing this.
So that is a very good question, and something we are a lot working right now in Consolis, and actually we are creating a common environment now for all Consolis companies. So historically, each company has had their own Tekla environment. They have maintained it completely separately. So everybody has been using their own firm settings, own templates, and so on. So definitely not everything can be made common, not everything can be standardized. But the advantage will be that if you have more and more common tools, then you should share the common things. So we have a separation of common tools, which are same for all business units, but then still each business unit has their own folders where they can store their own templates and own content.
You mentioned that you are going for your own custom environment. I have noticed that bigger groups and companies are doing these custom environments. Can you bring out some pros why to use custom or modify the custom environment, start taking care of this instead of using default environment, and why not to have the same files in firm folder, for example? What can you bring out for why to create a custom environment for your own company?
Yeah, I think it probably gives you mainly the flexibility that you can really use your own folder structure, even if you have some special way you want to have it, but mainly to make sure that everybody in your company is really using the same settings. And if you want to modify the settings to make it a bit different compared to the national environments like Sweden environment, if you want to modify some things there, then you still have the need to create your own company environment. So
can you tell me how big is CES Estonia or your this kind of like BIM managers group, whose main task is to develop different tools and for example, also develop this, keep eye on this environment, do the updates there, and how big is the group of these people in your company?
Yeah, so usually it is so that in one of our business units, so whether it is Parma in Finland or Spancom in Denmark, so usually one business unit there is one Tekla specialist or a development engineer, however you call it, who is maintaining the local part of the environment and also providing support for the users if needed. But since we are a group, since we are Consolis, then we also need someone from the central organization to organize all of the communication between different business units. So for that reason, we also have development engineers for the Consolis group, and even developers only committed to doing the development or internal tools. So we have these teams as well.
Can you reveal any tools or projects, or what are the most things you are working with? Is it on the drawing side, some modeling tools, some co-working tools, or what kind of tools or what kind of projects you have ongoing or what you're planning to do?
Yeah, I think the best and the biggest example right now is a project that has been running for a few years now, but we are getting closer and closer to making really big steps in it. Is a holocore design tool. So it's an end-to-end process for designing holocores in Tekla Structures. So it starts with getting the project info from our ERP system. So what is the number of the project, name of the project, so basically all the information about the project. Then you will model your holocores, and what is important there is that the holocore tool is in the background. It's using Tekla's own floor layout tool, but it is connected to our own databases. So the holocore profile and information about the holocore itself is coming from our databases, just to make sure that the quality of data in the model is exactly like we need to have it. And the importance of this data is that our holocore tool is capable of automatically calculating all of the holocores. So it will calculate each holocore separately and will apply the minimum needed strand pattern there in the model. And the calculation is also actually done with an internally developed tool for our purpose. And of course, the end of the tool is that you can generate the drawings automatically and publish the information to ERP systems again for the factories to work with. That is just one example of our current design tools, but there are a lot more.
Yeah. So you are putting a lot of effort and time to the automation part and to make it faster and also minimize human mistakes or these human errors that can done.
Yes.
Can you give some can you, Morten, tell me how goes in CES Estonia Consolis general workflow in your teams or in design teams? When you are seeing some project, you want to do the estimation, some offer, and then concept design and finishing project, and how far you're going. So how normally goes in your company this whole workflow? Can you give me some overview?
Yeah, very, very difficult to answer that. What is the normal workflow? So okay. Of course, there is the ideal workflow. So how we want to have it, but then you still need to consider that you will get different input from different clients. So input can even be on a PDF or on a DVG. Then ideally you will even get the correct IFC or even a Tekla model, which you can already work on. But of course, the ideal solution would be that you will already create the estimation project, so the tender project. You will also create in Tekla, and you will create it in a sufficient enough quality that if you need to work on the project later to make it more detailed, you will already use the same model, so you wouldn't need to recreate what you have already created. And then you will go with the same model to the end. So you will finalize the project in the same model where you started it, just to really avoid that you need to recreate a model after tender. So it's something probably many listeners as well know, that if you create a tender project, then you usually the deadline is in 2 hours or in the next day, and you will create it really quickly, and then it's not a very accurate model. Then you probably need to recreate it. But there definitely are also benefits if you do the tender model in a really accurate manner.
What would you say? Of course, it depends of the complexity of the project and the size of the project. But what can you say more or less? How much takes for you or the company, the normal engineer there, to make a tender model and take the quantities, and based on these quantities make the offer? So how much are you willing to put the time for this, to create this good quality tender model?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Like you say, it really depends on the size of the project as well. So it can be a day or a week, but just if I think from my own perspective, then I think the reason the tender models may be not so accurate isn't because you need to rush or anything, but it's more about the way you do it. So it could also be that if you utilize the tool correctly, if you use all of its functionalities and all of its power, then creating the tender model in an accurate way also wouldn't be so much more time consuming. But to give some real numbers, it's really hard to say.
I understood that you have your own ERP system, and they are connected with different informations, probably about the embeds and stock. Can you give me some examples more how you use these Tekla models when you start modeling the Tekla model, and what kind of additional, let's say, user-defined attributes to use your own ERP for your own ERP system, or some time scheduling or statuses cost something?
Yeah, we definitely add quite a lot of information that can be used in the site or assembly or in planning and so on. It definitely also differs a lot between the companies as well. But what is something that definitely everyone uses is the design statuses. So you can take any model in Consolis, and you will see what is the level of development of each element. And then this is something you can see from the model. You can see it if you're a project manager, if you're a modeler, or if you're doing estimations and such. And if we talk about the link with ERP, so then at the moment you publish the element to ERP, then we have a lot of information there also about the elements. Everything from the basics like element geometry and so on, but also all of the properties that we add as UDAs to the elements. But the more interesting part is that how can you get the information then back from the ERP? Like what is the production status? Is the element already produced, and so on? So we have examples where we are also utilizing that. So you can, in your model, you can see what are the production statuses also. Because since we have our ERP, then for each element, you can, of course, you can go into the project portals and check manually if your elements have already been costed. But for the designer, it will be really valuable information. Even if you start modifying an element, you will get a notification that, hey, this element is already costed. You cannot modify it anymore. So this is the place where the real benefits should come from.
Okay, and sharing the statuses goes using the Trimble Connect, or how you share the different, or you have your own development sending back and forward the information or EFC files. So how do you share between engineering, maybe management, and also the factory, different kind of information?
Yeah, between the different design teams, it's of course just through Tekla itself, through model sharing. But if you're talking about communication with the client, then it would be through the Trimble Connect, where you can also see the statuses.
working with clients or also engineers, what kind of solutions or softwares do you use more? I heard that Tekla Structures, AutoCAD is somewhere also waiting, Trimble Connect, your own ERP system. What kind of softwares or solutions do you use more for communication, sharing information, for calculations?
I would like to even answer from what I would like it to be in all places. Of course, we are not utilizing it to full capabilities yet, but we know that in Trimble Connect you can link, for example, you can link drawings to the elements, you can link the calculation files to the elements. So that would be the ideal case. But today it is not implemented definitely everywhere in the group.
But what do you use for analysis and calculations? Do you know what are the most used softwares?
Yeah, there are a few different, but mainly one of them is FEM-Design, which is mainly used in Sweden. But we also have a team in Romania who is very capable in using the FEM-Design for the global calculations. And then for calculating the elements itself, we have internal tools for calculating the hollow core elements and also wall elements.
Do you know how is do you have any experience how this FEM-Design connects with Tekla Structures? Do you do different kind of like calculation and model, like Tekla model, or can you import, export, communicate between? Do you have any experience?
I know that there is a link, but we actually haven't used it. So currently it's still one model in Tekla and one analysis model.
So the next I would like to know the quality, as it's quite old company and then quite many smart heads around there. So do you know what are your tips and tricks, or how you use to, or what do you do to raise Tekla structure model quality?
Yeah, I think my top tip number one is Tekla Organizer. It's really useful for really looking at the model as a whole entity. So if you want to check some specific parameters for all elements, it's really easy to show them in a list. What are the, for example, different exposure classes, what are the concrete classes, and so on. And you can use it to visualize in the model with different colors, where you have different concrete classes or some other parameters. I even used it in one case to make a tender model that I received, and I wanted to clean it up and make it better. The use case there was that a lot of the elements were a bit crooked. So the end point of the element was 5 millimeters under the start point. But then I also used Organizer. So I just took all elements into Organizer, and there you can really easily add a parameter that what is the Z coordinate of the start point and end point. It was really easy to find out where you had differences. It probably took a few hours with playing with Organizer, and I had the model already clean. So that is the first part. And the second part with quality is definitely to really look at it in that way that the more effort you put into modeling and detailing in Tekla, and the more you use different tools and components and rules in the modeling work, the less time you spend in drawings. So that is the key point I would also mention.
Okay, so drawings are taking less time creating drawings.
Drawings will take less time, and the less manual work you do in drawings, the better is your quality there.
Do you have any kind of like estimation how much time more or less your engineers are putting on modeling, and how much more or less goes for the drawings?
Yeah, so if we take, for example, walls, which are quite maybe not as standard products as hollow cores, but then generating a drawing of a wall, it can be from 5 minutes to many hours. So then it once again depends a lot on the complexity. So if you're doing really standard elements or very simple elements, then you can utilize a lot of the standard auto dimension settings and automatic part marks and so on. So these kinds of elements, I would say that if you spend more than 15 minutes in a drawing, then it's already too much. So it shouldn't be called creating a drawing. It should be called generating a drawing. Drawing should be the automatic output.
So that's good point. So simple boxes, standardized elements is one key point of getting a project done or these results as fast and quickly. Do you have any other tips or how to make Tekla more efficient or how to get the results faster? You mentioned the automation, have the standard elements, and then it's easier to create the drawings. Do you have anything more?
Yeah, so one thing that I could mention is that different companies have really different profiles. So if you're working for cast in situ, or are you doing precast, or are you doing steel? So if you open Tekla, then all the tools in the toolbar and in the component catalog, you have a lot of different tools. So then for me and for a lot of the designers, what I have heard from here and there is that you need to clean your workplace a bit. So to make sure that what you have in the ribbon, what the tools you have there, and what you have in the component catalog, they are structured in a way that you don't need to always search where your things should be and what you should do at what time. So then it's a bit about customizing basically the user interface for yourself to make sure everything is in a handy location.
Yeah. And here can come also the company BIM leaders in handy to at least some of the customization, bring out the tools that they are using more in company, bring out them and share this environment already for the users. And of course, users can tweak them more as they want. Okay. The next question is you have been connected also with different projects. So can you give me do you have any project to talk about where was something interesting going on? For example, something was very complicated or the schedule was tight or project anyway, something different and you managed to do it somehow.
Yeah, so I think to that question I can answer with a lot of different examples we have from our Swedish company. So since we are working in precast, but we all know that architects are really creative people, and especially with our sandwich elements, so our three-layered elements, we have a lot of very interesting facade solutions that the architects want to have. So a lot of different ways you can treat the facade. So you can have some kind of waves in the facade, or even some pictures in the facade in some format. So our factories can do these things quite easily. That's no problem. But quite often it's a problem that how do you model all these really complex shapes and patterns that you need to have on the facades. In newer Tekla versions, they have quite a lot of tools there, so you can make some continuous wave pattern or step pattern in the facades. And especially if you use the wall layout tool, then it is quite easy to do. But if we use the Tekla version 21, and I'm not talking about 2021, but the old Tekla 21, there it was a lot more complex. So I think in projects we did like 4 years ago, where for some reason we still used Tekla 21. There it was mainly about using the DWG profile. So you created some profile in DWG, you exported it into Tekla and cut out the shape of the facade to make it look nice. So that was one of the more complex things we have done. And one really interesting project we did last year, I didn't do it myself, but I was consulting others a bit how we should do it, is that we created a reinforcement model to a bridge. So it is really out of the scope of our usual work, since we only work with precast. But it was a bridge in Estonia, and it was with a quite complex shape. So it was curved in different directions. And it was quite a challenge to figure out the best ways in Tekla Structures how add the rebars in these really complex curved elements. But we succeeded quite well, and I must say that Tekla is really flexible in providing all these different cases and solutions.
What was your solution for this breach? Because I had one client also from breach industries, and there are quite some different tools, let's say, so for creating breaches and quite nice solutions. So what was your solution?
Yeah, so as you said, there are a lot of different ways to do it. So we experimented with almost all of them. So the shape of the bridge we managed to create with the Tekla's bridge creator. That was very handy. So you could, since we had the 3D line of the bridge, so we knew how it works in the 3D world, and we had a cross section. Then it was quite easy to get the shape of the bridge with that. But to do the reinforcement, that was a bit more complicated. But the good thing is because basically the direction of the bridge, so how the cross section changed in the 3D world was almost the same. So then what we did was that we modeled the 1 meter long element, like a dummy element, in which we added the reinforcement and copied it section by section inside the bridge. But I think at least my personal opinion and conclusion is that if you end up with the need that you need to create a lot of bridges and do the reinforcement, then you need to learn how to use Grasshopper.
Do you know why Consolis and CES Estonia or they are putting effort on or want to take Tekla Structures more and more in use, and what are the benefits and what is, for example, if some of the listeners are still using AutoCAD, then many times I get the question that AutoCAD is basically for free. Tekla Structures is so much more expensive. So why should we make the investment? Why it makes sense to start learning this complicated software, and does it give? How comes this? How it makes sense to go over?
Yeah, I guess for me it's quite tricky to even answer it, because I cannot even imagine anymore what it would be like to work in AutoCAD. But I can definitely try to answer that one. So I think eventually, if the customer gets the building, if you can walk in the building and you can use the building, then as a customer, in some way, you don't really care how the drawings and how the design was made. But let's say that now if you're a customer and if you want to get the as-built model, because nowadays it's quite often that it's not just the building the customer wants, but they also want to get the model later. So if you want to later do some changes in the building in, I don't know, 10 years or 20 years, then you need to have the as-built model, of course. And that is something I think with AutoCAD is super hard to achieve. So that is one thing. But also another thing definitely is that more and more clients want to be involved in the process of designing a building. And once again, if you're using a 3D model, if you do 3D design, then it's a lot easier to show the client already in the conceptual design phases that what is happening and what are you designing, and so on.
Do you know, is there any difference also? Have you measured about, for example, the speed, or how fast you can do the project? Is it faster, slower, or comes some difference out also the quality or the mistakes? Or
yeah, so if I think back to 4 or 5 years ago when we took Tekla, and before we were using AutoCAD, then we definitely were not more efficient from the beginning. But the reason for that is that we were basically, in some ways, we were using Tekla like AutoCAD. So you first created the model, then you created the drawing, and you did everything in the drawing manually. You added all of the dimension lines and all of the marks, and you did a lot of modification with hiding parts and showing parts and so on. But if you really use Tekla as a tool, it should be. If you use all the automation settings, I don't have the numbers because we don't really create AutoCAD design anymore. But I find it quite impossible to believe that I would create a model or a design with AutoCAD more efficiently compared with Tekla. And especially since you mentioned the quality aspects, then in a 3D model, it's really, really easy to check for conflicts, especially since more and more we get IFC models from other design parts as well, like from the ventilation design or piping and so on. So if you get the up-to-date IFCs every week from the other design members, then you can weekly just check in the 3D world if you have conflicts with other design parts as well. So that is something really hard to do in the 2D world with AutoCAD.
What do you think, what are your inside the company, what are your plans with Tekla Structures and developments, where you are planning to go, and what do you think generally, globally about BIM, where this world goes?
Yeah, so the first question is a really, really good one, and something we have been struggling, or not struggling, but we have been thinking about it quite a lot, that we are doing a lot of different developments. We have a huge number of designers in different countries who are working in different ways. But it has seemed to us before and more that we really haven't had the information, the data that actually where is the time going in the Tekla models, and how can we improve our efficiency? How can we make sure our designers are really using the tools that we provide them? And there is one thing that we have started that actually we can gather some automatic information from the usage of Tekla. And through that, we can see from all of our designers in Consolis that how many custom components they were using on that time period, what were the custom components they were using. And also, if you create some automation settings for drawings, you can check and follow up if we are using these automation settings. And it's not just about tracking the tools that we have created, but it's also to find about the tools that we are not using. So we can compare between different business units and companies that maybe there are some very good productivity commands that the one company is using, the other is not. Usually it's just because people are not aware of these tools. So then we can make our knowledge base between different designers a lot more common. I think this is a common theme to really use the information to make decisions, not just to make decisions based on feelings. And same goes for following the information that we have in the Tekla projects and models. We all know that it is you can create the reports from the models where you can show what is the design status, how many kilograms of reinforcement have you added. But using these reports, if you create the reports, let's say automatically every day, and you use some other tool for analyzing and transforming this data, you can have live, up-to-date dashboards for each of your models, where you see what has happened with your model in the past few months, and you can already make predictions how the next few weeks should be going. So once again, to make sure that we have the data from the model, which we can use to make decisions on.
Making decisions based on real data is something that I think it's very important also. And generally about the BIM world or in global, what do you see where it goes, the construction, on the construction sites?
Yeah, so a lot of things will happen, but definitely there are a few different standing points from where to look at that. So in the world that we are right now, where we all know that we need more and more information for different reasons. So if I would start with, for example, the environmental impact that the industry is providing to the world itself, then more and more customers, especially in the Nordic countries and other places as well, really want to get information also about their buildings, that what is the CO2 footprint of the building. And if you don't have a proper model with the real information, that where is the concrete coming from, where is the steel coming from, what embeds are you using in your elements, if you don't have that information, then it's impossible to try to calculate any real CO2 footprint. So that is the one part of BIM, that for each material or each element that you put in the model, there is some kind of connection to either your databases or some connection where you can see what is the material really used. Just to give one example, that even which factory you produce the building in. So for us, we produce precast elements, but for the customer, it's a big difference if we produce it in a factory that is 2,000 kilometers away from the site, or we produce it 200 kilometers away from the site, because the transportation cost and also the CO2 emissions coming from there is different. So basically, if you go to, in an ideal world, if I go to the ERP system and I change the factory the building elements will be produced in, then the client will see, okay, now I have this CO2 footprint, a lot less. So once again, it's about the information that we can get from the models. And another part definitely is the collaboration between the different counterparts, like between architects and the construction and the different design disciplines. So to really make sure that we would get more efficient in that sense as well, that it wouldn't be so that everybody is sitting in their silo and doing only their own design part. And eventually someone will get all of the 10 models together and see that there are 1,000 conflicts in there. So I think it's a really big challenge for the construction industry to make sure that it wouldn't be so like it is today, that only hunting is worse in efficiency than the construction industry. So we need to gain in that sense. I think BIM is the key there.
Ecological thinking, especially in Nordic countries and Europe developed countries, people are willing to pay more to be good. So thank you very much for Morten for your great podcast interview. If anybody is interested, then you can go to CES webpage, find the information about CES Estonia or also Consolis Group. Thank you very much, and we'll see you in the next episode that will be hopefully come out very soon. Take care and see you soon.
Thanks, bye.